Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our webinar, Beyond the Basics, using 2016 data to drive 2017 RD strategy. My name is Susan Snozzy, and I am the Boys and Girls Clubs of America's National Director for Resource Development Learning Initiatives. It is absolutely my pleasure to be talking to you today to spend a little bit of time on the science part of resource development. I think that RD really is an art and a science, but I think that a lot of our efforts focus more on the art part than the science part. We're pretty good at building relationships, at showing appreciation, at finessing our proposals, but we don't always take full advantage of the massive amount of data that we have in front of us. And through each piece of data, our donors are telling us something. And because data typically is something we get in aggregate, we can see how majorities of our donors feel by the behavior that's revealed through their data. And so in terms of where you get this data, hopefully you've got yourself a pretty good, robust database. In some cases, your database will be able to make these calculations for you. In other cases, you can pull the necessary data and make the calculations yourself. So I also wanted to just add that at the end of the webinar, I have several different resources for you to download, which will help you to do some of these calculations yourself. These include an impact calculator, a revenue diversification analysis template, and the RD planning guide and worksheets. All of them are going to be able to help you as you're trying to do these calculations. Now, Sharon has asked a question and brings us to the other important before we get started point of the webinar, which is if you have a question, just type it right in the question part of the question box on the screen there, and I will be able to answer it for you. Sharon is wanting to know how she prints out the handouts. And all you need to do is go under handouts. It will say 5 of 5. And you'll be able to save those handouts right onto your computer to print them or to use them electronically. Christine says that our sound isn't very good, and I'm going to just try to speak up, and hopefully technology will be our friend and cooperate with us today. Sound good? Okay. If you have questions as we're talking, please do type them in the question box. I will also stick around afterward to answer any questions that you have that come up during our time. So let's start with the 4 key areas to analyze when you're considering your 2016 data. These are general metrics, engagement metrics, giving metrics, and online engagement metrics. And so those are the 4 areas that we're going to be talking about today. First, let's look at general metrics. These will include your retention rate, your conversion rate, and the cost per dollar raised. Now, if anyone on this webinar has spent any time with me out in the real world, been to another one of my webinars, come to one of the trainings, talk to me face-to-face, you know that my #1 soapbox issue is donor retention. According to the 2015 Fundraising Effectiveness Survey, our donor retention nationwide across all nonprofits is just 43%. That means out of every 100 donors that we have, we lose 57 every year. That's not sustainable at all. It means that we're just sort of on this gerbil wheel, constantly running, trying to get more donors to replace the donors we've lost. And one of the ways that you start to elevate a donor relationship towards major and planned gifts is them making gifts year after year. So if we're always losing our donors, we can't get there. And the first way to stop losing your donors is to know your retention rate. So here's how to calculate your donor retention rate. It's important when calculating donor retention that you consider the same group of donors across 2 years. So for example, I couldn't say in 2015 I had 1,000 donors to the annual campaign, and in 2016 I had 900 donors to the annual campaign. Therefore, my donor retention rate is 90%, because I need to consider donors from that exact same pool of people. So that's just one important point to note as you're doing this. To calculate your retention, you take the number of donors who gave to your club in one 12-month time span, for example, 2015, and then the number of donors from that same pool who made a gift to you in 2016. You then we'll simply divide returning donors by 2015 donors, and that will give you your retention rate. So for example, in 2015, 1,000 people gave to the annual campaign. In 2016, 500 of those same people gave. When we divide those two out, we get a 50% retention rate. Now, 50% is better than the industry average, but it's still kind of miserable because it means you're losing half of your donors. And for those of you who are in small communities, I think the risk is that you could just run out of donors. So donor retention is really important. After you calculate this rate, you can start planning and strategizing for how will you increase your donor retention. Wendy is recommending that her donor database has a report that automatically calculates retention rates and makes this really easy to figure out. And I'm hopeful that in a lot of cases, your database is going to be able to pull this data for you. What you can also do with your retention rate is look at retention across various campaigns. So for example, what was your retention rate of your male donors? What was your retention rate of, and by that I mean direct male donors, not male versus female, your direct male donors? What was your retention rate of people who came to your steak and burger? And so you can sort of break this data down a little bit further to, again, help you spot trends so that you can see where a problem might be developing before it becomes a catastrophe. The next metric to consider is your conversion rate. Now, a conversion rate basically means how many people do you convert into a donor. So you take a desired action. Typically, this is you're wanting to convert someone into a donor or into an event attendee, but it could be that you're wanting to convert them into an email subscriber or something like that. You take that number, you divide it by the number who were invited to do so. So how many actually made a gift to your annual campaign divided by the number invited to do so. You then multiply that by 100 because that will give you the number expressed as a percentage. So you can use this as a simple way to evaluate your success. We tried to get 100 people to send us gifts. 10 people sent us gifts. Therefore, our conversion rate was 10%. Next, a measure of your efficiency is your cost per dollar raised. The inverse of cost per dollar raised is ROI, return on investment. There's a tool you'll be able to download after this so that if you don't have a database that will calculate this for you, or if you want to pull out specific events and activities, you can enter them into this database and it will calculate for you both your cost per dollar raised and your ROI. Sally is wondering what's the industry standard for conversion rate, which is an awesome question. I don't have an answer for you because the industry standard for conversion rates would be different across different campaigns, for example, for an email versus for a mailing. But I would say the Association of Fundraising Professionals almost certainly has those rates somewhere within the vast warehouse of data that they offer. So I would say check the AFP and see what they say. What's the industry standard for conversion rates on annual campaigns, face-to-face appeals, mail appeals, and so forth? For a direct mail appeal with a rented or purchased list, the conversion rate is often less than 1%. When you're using something like we usually have at clubs, which is either a warm list or even a list of previous donors, we would want the conversion rate to be a lot higher. But if our donor retention rate was 43%, then essentially our conversion rate is 43% because we were able to convert 43% of the people we wanted to donate into donors. Okay, so cost per dollar raised and ROI. Basically, this is something that most of you are probably doing after your special events, but I put it in here because it's actually a great metric to use after anything that costs money. Even your major gifts campaign costs money in terms of taking your donors out to dinner or sending them stewardship mailings, postcards, whatever it is that you're doing. In every program, there's a cost. So basically, this just says divide budget by I said budget by revenue. I did it backwards on there. That's pretty funny. No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, divide, your budget by your revenue. So if we spent $1,000 on our chili feed and we brought in $10,000, then our cost per dollar raised is 10 cents. So it costs us 10 cents to raise $1. ROI is just the opposite, where you would say when we invest 10 cents, our return on that investment is $1. They're the same calculation, just done backward. And there is a tool that you can download that will help you calculate that really easily. Okay, so that summarizes all of the general metrics: retention rate, conversion rate, cost per dollar raised. Now we're going to go to giving metrics. These are gifts received, average gift size, monthly gift analysis, and sources of income. All right, first, gifts received. I like this one because I'm not super at math. I always say I'm better at raising money than counting it. And this is the most simple math equation you could possibly need to do. Gifts received is literally just counting how many gifts did you receive in various areas. And I have a few here that I've suggested, but which ones you did would be totally up to you. How many major gifts did you receive? How many mid-level gifts, small gifts? How many people do you have who make monthly donations to your club, recurring gifts every month? How many planned gifts did you get? How many annual campaign gifts? So this data in isolation isn't really going to be that interesting or informative to you, but if you go back and then count the same thing for 2015, 2014, maybe even all the way back to 2013 or 2012, what you can do is a trend analysis, and you can see, are we getting a larger number of major gifts each year? Are we getting a larger number of monthly donations? Or is something happening like it looks like our income is going up, but that's just because we managed to pick up one more major donor, when in fact our annual gifts are going down, our planned gifts are non-existent, that kind of thing. So you can see the trend and be ahead of the trend. So this is just one really interesting way to look at that data and decide what you want to do about it. Next is looking at your average gift size. So this is just simply calculating an average, and you could use it across those same areas. What's your average major gift, your average mid-level gift, etc. Now, some organizations will say, what's our average gift size across everything? And I don't think that's a particularly telling number, because if you have one $1 million gift and the most of your other gifts are, say, $500 or less, $5,000 or less, the average is going to be completely thrown off by that one kind of anomaly in the data. So I would really encourage you to just break it down. Okay, so what's our average gift size across each kind of thing that we're doing? And then you can use that as sort of a starting point the next year. So for example, let's say that you realize the average gift in response to your mailing is $30. Next year, have giving levels that start just above that average gift size. So my lowest giving level that I'm going to suggest might be $40 or $50. Minimally, it would be $30. I don't want to encourage people to give less than what my average gift size was last year. Or let's say that I see the average gift size is really going down for the annual campaign. Why is that? I might look into it and find it was bigger in the years when people were asked face-to-face. Now we started doing more emails, calls, and mailings, and so the average gift size is going down. So this lets you see really what's the result of what you're doing. This is how you would do an average gift size. Again, I love it because this is an easy math as well. So you take the revenue for a specific activity, for example, your Youth of the Year Gala, and you divide it by the number of gifts for or the amount of gifts for that activity or time frame, and then you get your average gift size. So for example, my annual campaign yielded $10,000. The club received 100 annual gifts. Therefore, 100 is the average annual gift size. I would know that next year when I go out and talk to people, if $100 was the average gift, I want to be asking for more than $100 going forward, so I keep having positive growth in resource development. Yeah, so far so good? Great. Here are some things you can do with average gift size, as I already said. You can compare year over year. You can also evaluate growth in major gifts, because that's really, I mean, ultimately, if I had one wish for every club in the movement, it would be that your major gifts are growing exponentially. It's great if your special event's growing. It's nice if other areas of your revenue are growing, but I really want you to be doubling your annual gifts, your annual major gifts every couple of years. You can also use this to compare within categories. For example, how did our fall appeal do versus our spring appeal? What was the average gift size for each of those? What was the average gift size for steak and burger versus for the adult spelling bee? You can compare them and see, again, trends and where your time is best spent. Monthly gift analysis is I kind of made this up. I don't know what it should be called. I don't know if it has a formal name. This is what I call it. This is something that I really liked when I was at the club because I thought monthly gift analysis helped me to sleep at night. Because when you're a CEO or you're a resource development person, you have a lot of sleepless nights where you're worried about whether there's enough dollars coming in the door to make payroll, whether there's enough money for the things that you want to do for kids. It's hard because you don't know when the money's coming in. You don't know how much money is going to be coming in. It is seriously stressful. So if you go back to 2016, and even better if you do this over a couple of years, and look at each month in 2016, how many gifts did you receive? How many gifts did you get in January? How many gifts did you get in February? How many did you get in March, etc.? And then look at the average of how many dollars do you tend to receive each month. You could do that over the course of a few years. And then the timing of your major gifts. For example, I had a donor when I was at the club who always gave us a six-figure gift, but they always gave it to us the second week of December. That was really, really hard because that's a big gift. And so I was constantly kind of, on pins and needles about that gift. But when I looked back, they'd made the gift that same time for the last 10 years. So I knew it was coming, and I knew I could count on it. If you look at your monthly gift analysis, you'll start to see trends. Most likely, you will see that people are not giving a lot in January. They're giving a lot in November and December. You'll also probably see a mid-year kind of bump. And this will help you to better weather the peaks and valleys in income and just feel a little bit more self-assured and more able to sleep at night because you know that money is coming. You have a better idea of when it's coming. So I don't really know what that's called, but I'm calling it monthly gift analysis because I think it sounds fancy and I hope that it's helpful. Next, there is a tool that you'll be able to download after this webinar that will help you to do this. It will ask you to fill in each of your sources of donated income, and then it will produce for you a little pie chart kind of like this. What you can do with the pie chart then is compare your club's sources of donated income to the sources of revenue and the proportions of revenue outlined in the Giving USA report. So if you look at last year's Giving USA report, you will see that Americans donated $373 billion to nonprofits last year. Of that, 71% came from individuals, 9% from bequests, and although they're not broken out as a specific category, a large proportion also came from family foundations. So we know individuals are really, really important in terms of raising money because we know that's where the money is. So if I was to look at the graph on the left, which represents the Giving USA categories, the actual breakdown of that $373 billion, and the graph on the right, where what we've done is just aggregated all of the data from all of the Boys and Girls Clubs across the movement. And if let's say that was my club, and I was looking at this data to make recommendations, as you will once you figure out your sources of income using the handout that we have for you to download, I would make the recommendation that this club increase the amount of time and effort they're spending on individuals to try to get individual giving as a larger share of the whole. Decrease their dependence on foundations. I see that as a pretty big risk in this particular asset allocation because when the economy drips, foundations aren't able to give. They're typically funded off of an endowment, and when the endowment doesn't perform well, there's not money to give away. I'd say corporations is a little bit too heavy too. Giving USA does not break out special events, but most of our special event donors tend to be corporate, so we've got a heavy reliance on corporate. We'd like to get some more individuals and bequests, so you can look at this data to make recommendations about how you and your board spend your time. Okay, so now we have looked at our next category of giving metrics: gifts received, average gift size, monthly gift analysis, and sources of income. Now we're going to look at engagement metrics. Engagement metrics really measure the output of your development staff and or CEO and or board. And there are three real engagement metrics to look at: number of face-to-face visits, number of proposals presented, percentage of board members participating. And if you consider those three engagement metrics together, growth in those three engagement metrics is going to yield more success. So people are always asking me, hey, what's the secret to being good at resource development? What's the silver bullet? What's the number one thing you would tell me to help us raise more money? And your silver bullet is face-to-face visits. The more meaningful, purposeful, strategic face-to-face visits you have, the more money you will raise. I absolutely, unconditionally guarantee it. If anyone can show me that they did more visits this year than last year, but they raised less money in that area, I'll pay the difference because it won't happen. If you have meaningful face-to-face visits with your contacts, you're just going to raise more money. If you're ever feeling nervous about how you're going to raise enough money to meet your budget, get out of your desk, quit looking at your numbers, and go and visit some people. Now, these visits do, as I said, need to be strategic. They need to be purposeful. They need to be planned. There are some clubs who I've seen who will fill out a contact report detailing their visit, saying things like, I ran into Steve at a concert last night, and that's not really, that's great, and it's awesome that you talked to Steve, but that doesn't count as a face-to-face visit. A face-to-face visit would be if you and Steve had a meeting in his office, you and Steve went out to lunch, Steve came to the club, etc. It is a subject for another webinar, but I would say if you don't write it down, it doesn't count. So have some kind of a way to record notes from your face-to-face visits. And these will be face-to-face visits, certainly of staff, but also of board members. How many face-to-face visits are your board members doing? Because boy, getting those board members in front of donors is really, really powerful. How many face-to-face visits do I need, you might ask? Geez, people really tend to disagree in terms of how many they recommend. But the average across fundraising literature says for someone who is a dedicated fundraiser, whose job is Director of Development or Chief Development Officer, you want to have 3 to 5 visits a week. I understand that CEOs have so many other things that they need to be doing. If the CEO is getting out for 1 or 2 a week and the development folks are getting out for the remainder, or the board members are getting out, then you probably have enough face-to-face visits. But you can never have too many of them. So count how many face-to-face visits you have. See if you have more than last year. If you don't, try to go on more this year. You'll certainly see a correlation between number of face-to-face visits and success at resource development. Again, this is a metric I like because it's easy to count. Next is number of proposals presented. Proposals are when you are actually asking the donor to make a gift. You want that number to always trend upward, so you're asking for more gifts this year than you did last year. You asked for more last year than the year before. This is just simple counting, so that means it's another one I really like. Next, board participation. So both as donors and as participants in the resource development process, you want to have 100% board participation. So this doesn't mean that every board member needs to be out making asks. In fact, there are some board members you may not want to have making asks because they're nervous or hesitant, or you know that they're not very good at it. You may have some board members who can't ask. For example, I was at a board meeting once, and one of the board members said to me, I don't think I can ask for money. And I noticed that he was wearing a sidearm. I was like, I don't think I'm going to argue with this guy. And I said, why not? And he said, well, I'm a police officer, and I don't want people to think that I'm sort of peddling influence. I said, fair enough. First of all, you never argue with the board member who has a sidearm. But second of all, he's absolutely right. He was able to participate in other ways, like getting meetings set up for the staff, for the CEO, and for other board members. So this is a metric that you should certainly count, but that you should also mention at every single board meeting. Is all of the board participating in RD in some manner or fashion, and has all of the board made a gift? Now, just because you're counting the metric doesn't mean you should be doing an ask at the board meeting. Your board members are some of your very best and most loyal prospects, and they deserve all the same attention as a regular prospect would get, which includes a face-to-face meeting and a personal ask. But you should track this number at board meetings so that everyone knows how you're doing, so that you show the importance around board participation and you build that culture and that expectation that, hey, we are all going to be participating as donors and in some way in the RD process. The last category are your online engagement metrics. So now you've looked at your engagement metrics, your face-to-face visits, number of proposals presented, and your board participation. Now you're going to look at online engagement metrics, email conversion rate, email open and click-through rate, email opt-out rate. I will also say if you're doing a lot of fundraising on Facebook or other social media, you could use these same metrics. So first, your email conversion rate. Remember from the first section, conversion is just how many people are you able to get to do a certain action? How many do you convert into donors? So when I go to shoes.com, they're looking at whether they can convert me from just a visitor to somebody who's buying a new pair of shoes. And if I don't buy the new pair of shoes, then I'm hurting their conversion rate. So we should all hang up and buy some new shoes. All right, looking for trends in email conversion. You'll start to see some of your emails receive more donations than other of your emails. So why is that? That's the reason to do a calculation of email conversion, because you can start to see what's the most popular content. For example, if I get sent a club email and it has a story of a member that's really moving, I'm a lot more likely to give than if I get sent an email that talks about the club's strategic plan, which to me is not very compelling as a donor. What's the most popular content? What's the best time of day? What's the best time of week? There is lots of research about when's the best time to post on Facebook, to post on Twitter, to send out an email. You can certainly look at that, but the best research that you could have is your own donor's behavior based upon when you've sent out your emails. What subject lines seem to be the most effective? You've probably all heard of the Hey Obama email. This was during one of his presidential campaigns, and his staff was working on sending out an email, and they couldn't figure out a subject line, And someone, as a joke, said, let's just make the subject line, hey. And it became like newsworthy for how much that email was opened and responded to. So that particular subject line had a high conversion rate. And there are certain subject lines, those that make us feel a sense of urgency are more likely to have a higher conversion rate. What's the best writing style, formal or colloquial? Who's the best author for your emails as well? You can then look at, now you sort of know how to optimize your email. Optimizing your email means basically changing it based upon what content is going to get the optimum result. Just as you would do this with your mailings, like we talked about early on in the webinar, you can do it with your emails too. So you can then also look at who's reading your emails and who's opening your links. Because the people that read your emails and open your links are people who want to be engaged with you, are people who are interested in the messages that you're sending out. Those are people who, to me, have qualified. To me, they're saying, I'm ready for a little more of a relationship with this organization. Because as you see, looking at this slide, open and click-through rates are not as high as we want. I mean, I would love to think that everybody reads every email that we send out, but we know that it's about 1 in 5. And then we can see of that, even a smaller percentage is actually opening, clicking through, reading our articles. There was a club that I worked with who did an analysis of their open and click-through rates, and they found one donor who read absolutely positively everything they ever sent. And this was someone who had been an annual donor, sending them, like, I want to say it was $10 a month or $10 a year. It was really, really small. But they noticed that her engagement with the club was so high in terms of her interest in reading things online. So the development officer reached out to her and said, you know, would you like a tour? Would you like a meeting? And what ended up happening is they built a great relationship with her toward ultimately a planned gift. So looking at what our donors are telling us through their online behavior can be a really interesting way to do prospecting. Okay, then this is the last metric. It's our email opt-out rate. Interestingly, the industry standard for nonprofit email opt-out rates is really low. So opt-out is where you say, don't send me this anymore. And that means that if you're starting to notice that your opt-out rate is increasing or you have a high opt-out rate, you want to make changes to stay ahead of that trend. And you can go back and look at all of the stuff from when you were optimizing your email and when you were doing email conversion to see like what changes maybe you should make. I had one nonprofit that for some reason was sending me 3 emails every single time. It got so frustrating I just opted out of all of them. We don't want to be sending spam. We don't want people to feel like our emails are worthless. So we do want to consider our opt-out rates and look at what content precedes an opt-out. So that's all of the metrics that I have to share today. I have a couple more slides to go through that show some resources for you. So don't hang up just yet, but I would like to pause for a second to see what questions you have about these different calculations and data points that we've been discussing. Are there any other questions that we haven't covered? If you do have questions, you can just type them in because I'm not going anywhere. You'll see here under Resources to Support You, 3 things that you'll be able to download. The RD Impact Calculator, the Revenue Diversification Template, and then the RD Planning Guide and Worksheets. The RD Planning Guide and Worksheets lets you plug information into the first page, it carries it to the next page, carries it to the next page, and what you'll start to be able to get by doing this not only is your RD plan, but also you'll be able to get a trend data about what's your trend in foundation giving, what's your trend in individual giving, and it will even suggest how much you might want to increase that this year based upon that trend analysis. So it's a really cool way to do your RD planning and figure out this data. Okay, we've got a few questions, so let's hit those now. Are there suggestions for subject lines? You know, Shante, there was a cool article that I think Gail Perry put out a couple of years ago where she looked at the most popular subject lines for end-of-the-year emails and kind of said, these are the things that I'm hearing and so forth. I don't know what are the best or most popular subject lines. What I know is that involving the donor in communications, for example, you have the chance to save children, or making some kind of a sense of urgency tends to do very well. I once read an article that suggested that including an emoji could be a way to get people's attention because, you know, they're often reading on their phone. I'm sure if it's something you're interested in, you could find more, but that's my little bit of knowledge on that. Dakota is wanting to know if we're going to make this presentation available so that he can reformat and present. Oh, I'm so thrilled to hear that. Everybody do that. Yes, the presentation is going to be available in a couple of different ways. We will have it posted on bgca.net. We'll also have it posted on our YouTube channel. And over in the handouts, you'll see a PDF of all of the PowerPoint slides that you can download. Ron is wondering what's the best or most user-friendly donor tracking system. Oh, it's such a good question, and I'm not going to give you a very satisfying answer, which is that it really depends on your organization. But the databases that clubs are using, and feel free to type into the chat box, guys, if you want to help answer Ron's question. I know a lot of people have done well with Donor Perfect. I like Donor Perfect because it's somewhat scalable. Boys and Girls Clubs of America is now converting over to Salesforce. I used Razor's Edge when I was at the club. I would not say it's the most donor user-friendly, but it does have a lot of bells and whistles. Anybody else want to make a suggestion to Ron? Just type it in. Sharon was asking, how do we print the handouts? If you just go into your kind of dashboard, you'll see a tab that's marked Handouts. And if you click on that, you'll see icons for 5 different articles or resources that you can download. Andrew is wondering, what are some of the best practices in terms of leveraging a major anniversary? So Andrew, I am going to go through where our RD document library is, and that has club best practices within it, and I think that you might be able to find some good stuff there. What I would say is that every club is going through an interesting and important anniversary every 5 or 10 years, and there's such good opportunities to connect with donors. So I think that's great that your club is asking that question, and I hope the document library will be helpful. Let's see. John says they're using Donor View, which is cost effective. Julie is using Little Green Light. Ron says Exceed Primer, not very user-friendly. I see that my slideshow just decided to stop itself, which is always a good time. Sharon is mentioning that they have lots of email bounce backs, maybe because of the company's firewall. What do you suggest for how to handle? Absolutely. We get bounce backs when we do kind of what appears to be a mass email because it feels like spam to a firewall. So using Constant Contact or MailChimp is a good way to get around that. And for smaller nonprofits, Constant Contact even has a free program that you can use, so it won't cost you anything to use Constant Contact. And speaking of data analytics, Constant Contact gives you all kinds of cool analysis about your email, who read it, who clicked through, things like that. Let's see, Neon CRM is one that Dakota said they've just switched over to from eTapestry. So another good suggestion for you. John is wondering if anyone has run Facebook ads for donor acquisition. If anyone's done Facebook ads for donor acquisition, John would love to hear about it. You could type in here and we could just share email addresses. Is there a donor engagement calendar template available? Tazari, I think we do have something like that available. It's within the annual campaign toolkit, which is on bgca.net, and I'm just about to show you guys where to find that stuff. In answer to the question about the Facebook ads, Adriana says we used it, oh, this is in response to the databases. We used Kindful for a while, but it wasn't great. Okay, I am going to, first I just want to say how much I love it when RD people are able to get together and talk, and put in a quick plug for a program that we're going to start doing probably next month, which will be, basically there'll be online roundtable, or telephone roundtables where we can just get on the phone in small groups, and you all will have the opportunity to just talk, ask questions of each other, build some relationships, and so on and so forth. So be looking for those in your RD Pro newsletter. Okay, I want to show you how to find a lot of really wonderful resources on bgca.net. I know that bgca.net sometimes is a little bit confusing to navigate, so I thought that you might like just a quick walkthrough. So here we go. When you go to bgca.net, click on Funding. Once you click on Funding, you're going to click on Club RD. That's us. And that's where you'll find all of the resources that my team and the other folks in Club RD are putting out. This includes the Ask the Expert tool, our Best Practices library, which I just mentioned, our Club RD document library, and contacts that you can work with if you have questions. Know that you can always contact me if you have questions, but within our RD Club Services stuff, there are all kinds of resources here. And so let's say that you're looking for some stuff about your capital campaign, there's resources here to help you. You're wanting to see what other clubs have done, resources here to help you. There also, I'm going to go back a couple slides to show you. Funding events there in the top right-hand corner. That lists all of our upcoming webinars. That lists all of our upcoming face-to-face trainings, whether they're RD Academies, RD Orientations, or Advancing Philanthropy workshops. So within the funding page of bgca.net, you can find those dates, and then under Club RD, you can find more dates. I see that we have a couple more questions, so I'm going to just read these real quick. Donor acquisition on Facebook was not a great rate of return. They switched the language to in-kind and got more cash gifts than when they asked for cash. It's really, really interesting. We've used Facebook ads before with no measurable outcomes. So both of those are interesting points. I would say rather than try to acquire new donors, you know my soapbox issue, it's love the one you're with. Don't get new donors. Scale up your relationship with the donors that you already have. And Dakota says they're liking the grant proposal template for various programs. Please make more. I know. I want to make more of everything for clubs. I want you guys to have everything you could ever need, truly. So thank you for the feedback. We will work on it. Okay, this is my contact information. It's in the PDF that you're downloading. Really do, please feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions about the things that we've discussed in this webinar or the questions that came up after the webinar, because I'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you very much for attending the workshop today. Bill Gates says thank you for attending our webinar today. I hope that you will attend our next upcoming webinar, which is, I forgot to put it on here, it's February 28th at the same time. So please consider registering for that. That's our next Beyond the Basics webinar. I do hope that this was helpful for you today. I'm going to stay on for just a minute in case there are any more questions, but our formal webinar is over, and I appreciate your time. Thank you all so much.